So the three groups I was in, we were able to collate some very good points. And the first one was having an holistic approach. So that's intergenerational and peer-to-peer learning, because you cannot work with the children and the youth without their parents. And also, you do not want to work with just explicitly the youth and then have the parents as a barrier, because now that will inhibit your program. So if you can have the intergenerational approach and also the peer-to-peer approach, and then that will make your approach solid. And then another point that came up was asking what inclusion means to you and what trade-offs and interlinkages you can make. Sometimes if you want to be intentionally inclusive, you're going to have maybe to trade off on the numbers and maybe also the places or that you're implementing. And if you will not be able to provide your service and not be able to engage the youth meaningfully, do you have somewhere you can be able to link them or to a service that actually caters for the needs that they have? Um, we also talked about strategic planning in the three groups. Like have a strategic plan. Start thinking about the geography, the age, the people that you want to reach, even in your strategic plan, so that by the time you're rolling out the program, you've already ironed this out. And then go into the community. This was something we discussed with the last group, having that community approach. Do not involve the community at the last stage. Involve them from the first stage. Know who you're working with, who you're working for, and what you want to achieve, and involve them in all the steps of the implementation. Thank you.
So I'm going to talk to the approaches to youth engagement opportunities need to be flexible, as well as enable creative problem solving to barriers. And so in the beginning, we said, or it was, transparent and robust processes with an emphasis on safeguarding. And then, and this is key, youth need to be central to the problem solving. We need to embed reflective questions to identify young people's needs. And then there needs to be flexibility from a funding perspective. In other words, funders need to be more flexible between the theoretical approach and what's actually happening on the ground. So they can't necessarily say, well, we are funding X when the environment on the ground has shifted to Q. And from that perspective, there needs to be very, very detailed and ongoing communication, sort of up and down the stakeholder conduits. We need to get solutions from young people to what the anticipated barriers may be ahead of time. So from their own experience, providing their perspectives on what may be impediments to these particular challenges that they'll face. We need to consider access, and access can be things like geographical access. So a lot of this stuff rolls out in urban areas, but how do we then enable and provide access to people in a more rural context? And having said that, the obvious go-to is technology, but for example here in South Africa, access to mobile data is the most expensive form of data, often run out. We also have electrical challenges called load shedding, which you may or may not have experienced. And so those are sort of logistical impediments or components to be factored in to the context within which these kinds of conversations take place. And then co-designing for sustainability. And the last thing, which kind of came up around a conversation around hoping for success. And a lot of this stuff that we've shared or that we heard, this just talks a little bit from my personal experience, is, are the young people in a space of capacity to do this? In other words, how are they feeling? What is their emotional state? Can they engage meaningfully? Or do we need to support them to get into a capacitative state or a resourceful state so that they can meaningfully engage with this? Because if their environment, their context is such, you know, I don't have food, as an example, or I'm under extreme pressure, or as we've heard before, I've got traumas to deal with. How do we attend to that so that they can meaningfully engage in this creative problem-solving space? Thank you.
Who pass it to Luiz? Oh, okay. Oh, sorry.
I was saying there's not a lot of time, but I'll keep it very short because actually I'll just pick off on the meaningfully engage, because we looked at those principles. How can young people be set up to successfully meaningfully be engaged, and what are options for involvement? So I think let me touch on 3 things that I think stood out really from all the discussions. And one is really, what is success? How are young people successfully engaged, and not just looking at our numbers or how many young people have reached, but really, like we said, consider the daily realities, consider young people's needs, and listening to them in what training do they need, what do they need to be able to successfully succeed also in positions where they are part of staff positions or board positions, like Steph mentioned in her example earlier. And then we touched on this, something that I thought was really interesting, which was mentorship. And so mentorship of young people, but also young people as mentors. And then we kind of wrote that down and made a little sort of feedback circle, that it becomes this kind of cycle of support. Because even when then young people are mentors of others, then still they also still need mentorship. We all need mentorship, you know. So then it becomes this kind of cycle of support, which can be really useful in having meaningful and successful engagement, and for all of us, for young people, but for everyone. So thanks.
Thank you, everybody, for your inputs. I think there's some really similar themes, but also some unique ways where we're applying these different principles. As to wrap up this session, first, the report that we've been speaking about and speaking to will come out in the next meeting for the Child and Youth Working Group. Second, we'll keep all the notes up here, and you can come take a photo of them if you'd like, or we will try and type them all up and post them in the group following the meeting. And third, if you have any feedback on the principles themselves, please email us at the Child and Youth Working Group email. And as we sort of finalise everything, it'd be great to still get any additional feedback. It's childandyouth@gman.org. And it'll be monitored by all of us, and we'll get back to you as well. So thank you so much for attending. We'll be at the front if you have any questions. And I hope that the discussions were both practical, but also that we have such a wealth of knowledge in the group. So lovely to hear from everyone. Thank you.
you so much, and again, thank you for inviting me to participate online. Hi everyone from Zurich. So, thank you for the question indeed. This partnership we have started a year and a half ago with UNICEF covers for now 7 countries, which are namely Ecuador, Colombia, and Mexico for the Latin America region, and Nepal, Vietnam, the Maldives, and Indonesia for the Asian Pacific region. Surely, I mean, we resort to several innovative pathways to create this impact. And there are, I'd say, 3 core programmatic components to make this happen. The first one we resort to, which is targeting possible countries but also having a global reach, is the global campaign called #OnMyMind. You may have certainly seen this campaign being activated in your own network now for more than a year. And the idea here is to tailor and design assets that are both tailored for youth in the respective context and also for caregivers. So basically it's really about building up an ecosystem, leveraging on the power of digital content and digital platforms. This content unfolds in platforms such as LinkedIn, Instagram. There's also the On My Mind platform per se that has got a series of articles, always tackling a different topic that relates to mental well-being, prevention, and promotion. On the top of this, we also work with ambassadors. And for this campaign, I think the power of ambassadors for young people to identify to is key. And this is how we try to unlock discussions about mental health in a given family, in a given school, community, and at country level. The other innovations that we resort to, and I think I connect very much with what Stephanie said about sharing tools and knowledge, is that with UNICEF we have designed 2 series of materials or packages, one to work with youth groups, the other one to work with caregivers. Those materials are currently being piloted in several countries and they should be open source from next year onwards. And totally, instead of replicating always in a way the creation of materials, we can also leverage on what we have at hand, share, expand reach, and contextualize those materials to given settings. This is how we work with UNICEF. I think at the end, it's also very interesting to see how mental well-being is being both a universal topic, but also very specific to context. So the cultural adaptation of these core thematic pillars is key to the success to make sure that we can indeed impact positively this number of thousands of people you mentioned.
Thanks, Sofyen. And that point there at the end around, like, I guess the sharing widely, but adapting deeply to context as well is such an important point to bring to this discussion. I know that in talking to you and with others, that there's a summit coming up that you're part of, that the Zurich Foundation's part of. Can you tell us a bit more about how you'll involve young people in that summit?
Totally, thank you. You may all be knowledgeable about One Young World Network. So One Young World is a network of young leaders that can take in many forms. And this can be through a global community of young leaders, but there's also an in-person summit happening in Belfast early October. Here at the Zurich Foundation, we will lead on several mental health events. And this translates in panel discussions, roundtables, thematic dinner, for instance. Here the goal is, at one end, young people all over the world recognize mental health and mental well-being as one of their priority topics. So this summit will enable everyone to come together from all continents in the world and really build on this momentum. Connect people, build up on best practices, share certain models that have been impactful in similar settings. The point of this summit is really to leverage, as you're doing right now in Cape Town, on the in-person connections of young leaders. From the Zurich Foundation, we are also bringing 15 young leaders to this event in October from almost all the parts of the world. And we also enable these young leaders to pitch for their mental health innovations and be awarded seed funding from the foundation to increase the impact of their proposed initiatives. So this is like a 360 type of support we bring to young leaders in the mental health space there, but I think with a lot of humility, it will be an amazing source of learning for me as well.
Thanks, Sofyen, and excited to hear more about it and how also our members at GMAN can get involved. and sort of amplify what you're doing as well. Speaking of what everybody is doing in the room and online, we wanted to use this next moment, so we'll have about half an hour now to get into 4 groups to talk through the principles that we are speaking to in today's discussion, for everyone to share around how are you implementing these principles in your practice, and how can we progress the implementation of these principles, and who do we need to bring into this conversation to do that. So what we're going to do is split up the room. So we'll have 4 groups here in person. So if maybe the first 4 rows here on the left-hand side, and then the back 4 rows, and then we'll have the first 4 rows here, and then the last 4 rows there, and online will be 1 group as well. What we'll do is have about 10 minutes to talk to 2 principles, and discuss with your group how you're implementing them, how we can progress implementation, and then the facilitators will rotate, and then at the end we'll bring together some of those insights. So what I might do is assign some facilitators first. So maybe Luiz, do you want to take this group here? This one here, and then Steph at the back, and then Judah the right, and then I'll do this one here. Okay, so if everyone wants to make their groups, and then we'll come back together in about half an hour.